There comes a moment in every person's life, quiet as a held breath, when we must decide whether we belong to ourselves or to the noise of everyone else's expectations. I have lived long enough and lost enough and found myself again enough times to stand before you today and say this plainly. Value yourself first, because nothing, not approval, not applause, not the comfort of being needed, is worth the trade of your peace. I did not always know this. There was a season in my life when I bent myself into shapes I did not recognize, just to fit into rooms that were never built for me. I smiled when I wanted to weep. I stayed silent when my spirit was screaming. I gave pieces of myself away like loose change, thinking there would always be more where that came from. But peace, my friends, is not loose change. Peace is the whole treasury. And when it is spent, it does not simply refill itself because you wish it to. I want you to understand something about peace. It is not the absence of struggle. It is not a life free of storms. Peace is the steady ground beneath your feet even when the winds are howling around you. It is the quiet room inside your chest that no one else holds the key to but you. And too many of us, in our hunger to be loved, to be seen, to be chosen, have handed that key to people who never once asked to be trusted with something so sacred. Think of the times you have shrunk yourself so someone else could feel tall. Think of the arguments you swallowed, the tears you hid, the dreams you folded up small and tucked away because someone told you, in word or in silence, that they were too much, too loud, too inconvenient. I am here to tell you, you were not made to be inconvenient to anyone. You were made whole. You were made complete, and no one, not a lover, not a friend, not a family member, not a boss, not a stranger with a loud opinion, has the right to ask you to dim yourself so that they might shine in your shadow. There is a kind of woman, a kind of man, a kind of soul who has learned the hard lesson that peace is not selfish, it is sacred. It is not arrogance to protect your spirit. It is not cruelty to walk away from what wounds you. It is not betrayal to choose your own well-being over someone else's comfort with your suffering. I have heard people call this selfishness. I call it survival. I call it wisdom. I call it the beginning of a life truly lived, rather than merely endured. Let me tell you what I have learned in the long walk of my years. People will try to convince you that your peace is negotiable. They will tell you that if you truly loved them, you would sacrifice your joy for their comfort. They will tell you that boundaries are walls, that self-respect is coldness, that saying no is a kind of violence against their wants. Do not believe them. A boundary is not a wall. It is a door with a lock, and you alone decide who gets to enter. Self-respect is not coldness. It is the fire that keeps you warm when everyone else has gone home. And your no, spoken clearly and without apology, is one of the most loving things you can offer both yourself and the world, because a no born of self-respect is more honest than a yes born of fear. I have seen too many beautiful souls grow bitter, grow tired, grow small, because they believed love meant losing themselves. But hear me now. Love, real love, does not ask you to disappear. It does not ask you to abandon your peace at the altar of someone else's need. If a relationship, a job, a friendship, a room full of people requires you to leave pieces of yourself at the door just to be welcome inside, then that door was never truly open to you. It was only open to the version of you that served someone else's comfort. You are allowed to leave rooms that were never meant to hold your whole self. You are allowed to close doors gently without slamming them, without apology, without 1,000 explanations. You do not owe the world a reason for choosing your own peace. You do not have to justify your healing to people who only ever benefited from your hurting. I want to speak now to the ones among you who have been taught that your worth is measured by how much you can give away. The ones who answer every call, carry every burden, absorb every storm that is not even yours to hold. I see you, I have been you, and I am telling you, with all the love I have gathered in this long life, You cannot pour from an empty vessel, and you were never meant to run yourself dry for people who would not spare you a single drop in return. Valuing yourself first is not about turning your back on the world. It is not about becoming hard or distant or unkind. It is about understanding that you cannot offer real kindness, real generosity, real love, from a place of depletion. The oxygen mask must go on your own face first, not because your life matters more than others, but because an unconscious hand cannot help another. Your peace is not the enemy of your compassion. It is the very foundation that makes your compassion possible. There is a certain kind of freedom that comes when you finally decide that your peace is not up for debate. It feels, at first, like grief, because you will lose people, you will lose situations, you will lose the version of yourself that was so desperate to be needed that she forgot to ask whether she was respected. But on the other side of that grief is a stillness so profound, so unshakable, that you will wonder how you ever lived without it. You will look back at the years you spent shrinking and marvel at how much space you take up now, simply by allowing yourself to stand tall. So let this be the lesson you carry from this room today. Nothing, no relationship, no job title, no fleeting moment of approval, no fear of disappointing someone, is worth the theft of your peace. Not the family member who only speaks to you in criticism. Not the friend who only calls when they need something. Not the partner who makes love feel like labor. Not the version of success that requires you to abandon your own soul to achieve it. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to choose the quiet, steady joy of a life lived on your own terms, even if it means walking a lonelier road for a while. Because a lonely road walked in peace will always be better than a crowded room walked in pieces. Value yourself first, not out of vanity, but out of reverence for the life you were given. Not out of coldness, but out of the deepest kind of self-love, the kind that says, I am worthy of peace, I am worthy of gentleness, I am worthy of a life that does not require my constant sacrifice to be considered good. Go from here today and guard your peace the way you would guard the most precious thing you own, because it is. Let no one convince you otherwise. Let no room, no relationship, no fear talk you out of the truth that you, just as you are worth protecting. And when the world asks you to shrink, to bend, to disappear a little more, stand taller instead. Speak softer, but stand taller. Because you were never meant to lose yourself in order to be loved. You were only ever meant to be found. By yourself, first and always. Let me tell you about the weight of silence. The particular kind carried by those who have spent a lifetime agreeing when their whole body wanted to refuse. I have known that silence intimately. It sits differently in the throat than peace does. Peace is light, like breath drawn easily. That silence is heavy, like a stone swallowed and carried in the belly for years, decades even, until one day you wonder why your shoulders ache, why your sleep is thin, why joy feels like a language you once knew but have forgotten how to speak. That ache is not weakness. It is your spirit, patiently, insistently asking to be heard. There are those who will tell you that endurance is the highest virtue, that a good person suffers quietly, absorbs without complaint, gives without asking anything in return. I want to challenge that teaching, gently but firmly, because I have watched it hollow out too many good and gentle people. Endurance without boundaries is not virtue, it is erosion. A river that gives and gives without ever being replenished does not stay a river for long. It becomes a dry bed, a memory of water. You were not put on this earth to become a dry bed for other people's thirst. I think often of the difference between being needed and being valued. To be needed is to be useful, a hand that fixes, a shoulder that carries, a voice that soothes. To be valued is something else entirely. It is to be seen fully and still chosen. It is to be loved not for what you provide, but for who you are when you provide nothing at all. Too many of us have confused the two, have mistaken our usefulness for our worth, and have organized our entire lives around staying useful so that we might never be abandoned. But hear me, a love that only stays because you are useful was never love. It was arrangement. It was transaction wearing love's clothing. You deserve more than arrangement. You deserve the kind of love, the kind of friendship, the kind of belonging that does not require you to keep proving your value like a candidate forever, auditioning for a role that should have been yours by birthright. Your worth is not up for review. It was decided the moment you drew your first breath, and no committee of disappointed people gets to reconvene that decision. I want to speak of the particular exhaustion that comes from being the peacekeeper in every room you enter, the one who smooths tension before it can rise, who translates other people's hostility into something more palatable, who absorbs conflict so that everyone else might remain comfortable. This is a heavy calling, and it is rarely chosen freely. It is usually assigned in childhood, in some house where love was conditional on your ability to keep the peace between people who could not keep it themselves. If this is you, I want you to know you are not obligated to carry that role forever. The child who learned to read a room for danger is allowed, as a grown soul, to simply enter a room and breathe. There is a myth that self-sacrifice is the truest measure of love, that the more you give up, the more you have proven your devotion. I have lived long enough to know this myth for what it is, a beautiful lie that keeps generous people small and selfish people comfortable. Real devotion does not require your disappearance. A love that asks you to erase yourself piece by piece is not asking for devotion at all. It is asking for surrender, and those are not the same thing, no matter how similar they may sound in the moment. Consider, too, the voice inside you that whispers when you finally choose yourself. The voice that calls it selfish, that reminds you of every person who might be disappointed, that catalogs every relationship you might strain by simply saying, "This no longer serves my peace." That voice is old. It was likely planted by someone who benefited from your self-neglect, and it has simply taken up residence in your own mind, speaking now in your own voice, so convincingly that you have mistaken it for truth. It is not truth. It is inheritance, and inheritance can be refused. I have watched people spend entire seasons of their lives waiting for permission to rest, to leave, to say enough. They wait for the perfect justification, the undeniable proof, the moment when even their harshest critic would agree they were right to choose themselves. That moment rarely comes, because the people who benefit from your self-sacrifice will never willingly grant you permission to stop. You do not need their permission. You do not need anyone's permission. Your own exhaustion is proof enough. Your own diminishing joy is evidence enough. You do not owe the world a trial before you are allowed to rest. Think, too, of how differently we treat our own suffering compared to the suffering of those we love. If a dear friend came to you and described the very life you are living, the swallowed anger, the abandoned dreams, the constant shrinking, you would tell them without hesitation that they deserved better. You would hold them and insist they were worth more than what they were accepting. Why, then, do we so rarely extend that same fierce tenderness to ourselves? Why do we become such gentle advocates for everyone but the one person we spend every single moment of our lives with? I want you to practice a new kind of listening, not to the demands of the world, but to the quiet signals of your own body and spirit. Notice when your chest tightens before a certain phone call. Notice when your stomach sinks before entering a certain room. Notice the difference between the tiredness that comes from meaningful effort and the tiredness that comes from constant, low-grade self-betrayal. Your body has been keeping records long before your mind caught up, and it is far more honest than the voice that tells you to keep enduring. There is also a grief that comes before the freedom. I do not want to pretend otherwise. Choosing your peace will cost you things. It may cost you relationships that were never healthy, but were at least familiar. It may cost you the identity of being endlessly agreeable, endlessly available, endlessly accommodating. Grieve that loss if you must, but do not let the grief convince you to turn back. Even the most necessary surgeries leave scars, and even the most necessary departures leave a kind of mourning behind them. That mourning is not a sign you made the wrong choice. It is simply the sound of an old self being released, so a truer one can finally step forward. So here, at the end of all these words, let me leave you with the one truth that outweighs every other truth I have spoken today. You will not remember at the close of your life the rooms you kept peaceful at the cost of your own storm. You will not treasure the years you spent small, so that someone else could feel large. You will not look back with pride on every time you swallowed your voice to keep the comfort of people who never once asked how much it cost you. What you will remember, what you will hold close in your final, quiet hours, is every moment you dared to choose yourself, every door you closed with grace, every table you rose from because it no longer fed you, every love you refused because it demanded your disappearance. Every breath you took alone, if necessary, in a peace that belonged to no one but you. Do not wait for the world's permission to matter to yourself. Do not wait for a crisis, a collapse, a breaking point, before you decide that your peace deserves protection. Begin today. Begin in this very moment, in this very room, with the smallest act of honoring what you feel and what you need. Let it be a word unspoken that no longer serves you, a boundary drawn where before there was only surrender, a rest taken without guilt trailing behind it like a shadow. You were not born to be everyone's peace at the expense of your own. You were not shaped, breath by breath, bone by bone, simply to be poured out until nothing remained. You were made whole, and you are allowed to stay that way. So walk from here today, carrying this as your compass. Value yourself first, guard your peace like sacred ground, and let nothing, no person, no title, no fear, no old wound dressed up as love, convince you that you are anything less than worthy of the life, and the stillness and the joy you have spent so long giving away to everyone but yourself. Go now and be whole. Go now and be free. Go now and finally fully belong to yourself.